if somebody's head falls off, you have to know how to put it back on. And we do. I remember the first time I was in OR watching a facelift. It's a big deal. I take out lungs. I've done all the did aneurysm
Yeah.
stuff. So I'm doing a facelift. I'm supposed to worry about a little bleeding I see. Stop it.
Welcome to the Deep End. Today we're joined by Dr. Gerald Imber, world-renowned plastic surgeon, author, and medical historian. Based in Manhattan, Dr. Imber directs a private clinic, serves on staff at New York Presbyterian Hospital, and Weill Cornell. He pioneered the limited incision facelift technique and has performed over 25,000 surgical procedures. But beyond the operating room, he's the acclaimed author of Genius on the Edge, the definitive biography of William Halstead, a book that pulls back the curtain on one of the surgery's most brilliant and troubled minds. He also has a new book, Cardiac Cowboys, and an associated podcast series, which we are all very excited about. In this episode, we explore Dr. Imber's own journey through medicine, how he became a famous author, his perspective on the evolution and cost of plastic surgery, and how writing reshaped the way he sees his craft. Let's dive in. Well, it's an incredible honor to have you on tonight on the Deep End podcast. This is a moment that I have been waiting for since I was a Halstead surgery resident, and I need to think back to when it was 2011. So I don't want to bore the audience too much, but I have a stack of books here, about this many books, and I'm going to quickly go. This is number one on my list. Does this look familiar?
It does, but you have it upside down.
Oh,
He likes to read upside down.
I read upside down. This book. I also have this one. Have you read that one? Halstead of Johns Hopkins.
I have.
Yeah. So anyways, I'm not going to bore you, but I have a lot of old Halstead books. And then
McCallum, that's the old one.
It's the old one. And then
geography.
Aaron Warman, a very close friend of mine and one of our partners at Penn Plastic Surgery on faculty, gave me the William Stewart Halstead surgical papers when I was a graduating plastic surgery resident, when I graduated from Penn prior to going on to fellowship. So long story short, it's such a huge honor for many different reasons to have you on tonight. And it's funny because when I first read the book, we're not going to get into the book tonight, but when we first read the book, Dr. John Cameron used to always say, it is an incredible book, but it's written by a plastic surgeon.
He said that to me at a meeting I think at the Halstead Society or some meeting that we held up at High Hampton. And
yes,
we were all lifting a few. He said it should fall to a plastic surgeon to do this who's never walked through Johns Hopkins. It's great.
But yeah, so he's funny. And when I had to break the news to him that I was going into plastic surgery, not surgical oncology, it wasn't the easiest conversation.
Really? And he's such an easy man. That's so interesting.
So easy. But anyway, so one of the things that really interests Hank and I, and one of the reasons why we absolutely love to do this podcast, is because we're able to talk about things that aren't really talked about at conferences. And so going back to looking back on your childhood years, your upbringing, what was that like? Did you like to write I look at my daughter and she loves to draw. She draws all the time. Were you the kid that was always writing and your parents were like, why are you always writing?
No, I wanted to be an architect.
Uh-huh.
I was drawing. And basically I grew up in Brooklyn in a middle-class family. And Brooklyn wasn't as she as it is now. Mm-hmm. It was people who actually worked, and it wasn't at all what young people think of as Brooklyn. And we lived in the kind of neighborhood where we had no key for the front door, because just no one ever would go into someone else's house, and there was always somebody looking out the window or sitting on the stoop.
That's amazing.
It was a neighborhood. It was wonderful. And I think that...
Has it changed much? I'm just kidding.
I don't think that my neighborhood changed a heck of a lot. If it starts off architecturally bereft, it doesn't get much better. It's not like the areas in Brooklyn like Crown Heights where wonderful single family homes were made into multiple family dwellings and then converted back. So they're elegant. This wasn't elegant.
Yeah.
But it was a nice place to grow up.
Yeah. So, and what would you say were your early interests, or that kind of helped guide you to pursuing medicine? I know some of this because of reading about you, but I like to hear it from you.
It's different than most people. I went into medicine because my friends did. I really didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. And when I was, I guess, around 16, my father had a stroke and was disabled. He was disabled for the rest of his life, another
Sorry to hear that.
25 years. And I had to work at night or during the day, go to school at night, whatever, it didn't matter. And I went to City University, Brooklyn College of City University, instead of going away like everybody else did, because we couldn't afford it anymore. And it was a wonderful place to go. It was really difficult to get into that school at that time. Everybody was really smart. And I had a terribly little interest in school. I did what I had to do. I was smart enough to always do well. I ran a restaurant at night and went to school during the day. In the classes in which I had any interest at all, I was number one in the class. And the rest of the things I flunked. So if I
That sounds like me.
I had to graduate from college, I would still be there. But after 3 years, I was accepted in a whole bunch of medical schools. And the proviso was I wouldn't have to graduate from college. And the wonderful thing that happened is about 10 years later, the City University contacted me and said their rule is when someone gets an advanced degree, they then bestow upon them the degree they were originally working for. And they wanted to give me a BS. And I wouldn't take it. I wasn't there. I didn't earn it. Just, like forget it. And so I really never had, I was too busy living life to worry about anything, just cruising through my studies. And all the smart guys just were going into medicine. So I said, kind of, that's what they're going to do. I should do it too. These guys are my friends and fellows I hung around with. And lo and behold, a whole bunch of medical schools accepted me. And I went to State University of New York Downstate Medical Center because it was a state school and very inexpensive. And I got 2 scholarships on top of that. One of them was significant enough that I could buy a convertible. So that worked out really great.
What kind?
Wow.
And that was an old Plymouth convertible. It was fantastic. And the first time I ever liked school in my life was in medical.
It's a good thing the scholarship didn't know that money was going towards the convertible.
No, they were giving me money because one was because they thought I was smart, and the other was because they thought I needed it, because they found out that I was driving a cab at night when I was in medical school.
We need to make some amendments to the pen plastic surgery,
But it was great. It was great stuff. But the thing is that I found for the first time, I thought that everybody in the room was smarter than I was. And I never felt that before. And then that competitive juices started to roll. And then from then on, and I was just into it 100%. And I loved every second of medical school. As much as I disliked all school before that, it was an experience. There was just nothing boring, not a second. And also, I was always worried. You guys, you know how it was. It was tougher than
Yeah.
And the second year, when in my generation, after the second year, everybody got married. So when I went into the clinical years, I was already married, and I thought I was a grown-up. And by that time, I was suddenly a doctor. And of course, nobody knew me earlier believed it. A lot of people still don't believe it.
Was there a moment or a mentor specifically during your years that guided you towards a specialty versus another?
There was. I've always been a technically able surgeon, and when I got out of I was in the Berry plan, which means I had to go into the service. It was Vietnam, and when I got out of the Air Force, I was doing general surgery. I wanted to complete my general surgery, but I didn't think I wanted to be a general surgeon. My wife was from L.A., so I moved out to L.A. and I went to work at Kaiser. Took a residency at Kaiser. I had done so much surgery in the Air Force that I got a year's credit to my residency because I'd done hundreds of cases. And the chief of surgery was a guy named Roscoe Squires Wilcox.
What a name.
That's a great name. And he was a great man. And one day he said to me, basically, you're too crazy to be a general surgeon. You should be a plastic surgeon, because I like the ballet of surgery. I would scrub with him, he'd scrub with me, and you see every suture fell the same way. I just loved it, and I was faster than the guys on staff. It was, a gift. I wasn't the smartest guy in town, but I was a very good surgeon. And he said, when I was in the service, my best friend was this guy, Herb Conway, who was the chief of plastic surgery at Cornell. And that's where he went to school. And he was a resident at New York Hospital. I said, let me call him and get you a job. And he called me and said, I have a kid for you. And that was it.
That's how it used to work. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It was quite terrific. And I went
Yeah.
to did do my residency at Cornell, New York Hospital. And I think I was the only fully trained surgeon at that time in the resident group. Everybody else did something else. And it was quite amazing how well it served me. It was absolutely terrific.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you know much about New York medicine in the 70s, but places like New York Hospital were it's an Ivy League medical school, and New York Hospital, Ivy League, the medical school was Ivy League, and the hospital was serving the Upper East Side and very fancy.
Mhm.
And in fact, that's where Halstead was originally.
Yep.
And we had no real emergency room. You had to have an American Express card to get in there. And so we had very little. We had very little in the way of trauma, but an enormous clinic, enormous. And I did, I mean, dozens and dozens of rhinoplasties in my 2 years of residency, and just every case I wanted to do, and it was just a fabulous experience. And then the Conway had died, and the routine at that time at New York Hospital and maybe a lot of other places was they train you and they throw you out. They didn't want anybody practicing in the area. And I was the first person that they asked to stay in a very, very long time, not as a full-time person, but to actually go on the voluntary staff and join the staff. So,
And you've been there ever since.
yeah,
That's amazing.
kind of.
Why do you think they asked you to stay versus,
I think I,
other
I
people?
think
They predicted the book.
I fooled them. I was a very good resident and a very good surgeon. When I was at Kaiser, I'd learned something that lesson for all residents. Back in the service, I thought I was a hot shot and all that crap. And a lot of the general surgeons there everybody was trained in Boston or New York, and they were really from the Halstead school.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted everything. They wanted blood. And I wasn't prepared to give them blood. I was prepared to do a good job. And I always thought I did a good job. And one day it occurred to me that if I come in a half hour before these guys, we used to make rounds with the attending on the service at 7 o'clock. So if I come in at 6 o'clock, myself, change all the dressings and memorize all the lab reports. And then when we go around and pick up the charts, I can just spout everything. And they ask about the wounds, I can just spout everything. So I put in an extra 45 minutes a day, and suddenly I was a genius. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it was just like, you just have to work a little harder. That's all it is.
It's a good
Yeah.
lesson.
That's all they wanted. That's all I want. I want the resident to do their job and show they care.
Yeah. Well, they took away pre-rounding, so now Hank can pre-round.
They also added the lab reports to my phone, so I don't need to memorize
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
Oh my God. My God. Well, that's terrible. It's how can you learn? But that was a big lesson I learned in general surgery.
Yeah. So it seems like such a special experience back then, what you trained in and what you experienced during your training, and then staying in New York. And through that time, how would you say that your practice sort of evolved? Has it always been the same? And also during that time, how did plastic surgery evolve at the same time?
That's a great question, and it's the history of plastic surgery. It had just become plastic surgery had just become an acceptable thing to talk about, even among surgeons, because plastic surgeons, up until 73, early 70s, would always talk about the great reconstruction they did and forget about all the facelifts they did. Like everybody did the same thing. Conway did that. Converse did that. All these guys were doing facelifts and didn't speak about it because it thought it was not who they are. And then Tom Reese wrote the book Cosmetic Surgery of the Face, or Aesthetic Surgery of the Face. I think it was in 1973. And it's a fabulous book, and it became the Bible of cosmetic surgery. And Tom at that time was married to a fashion model, and he knew everybody in the world. And so he was interviewed every place. And he actually accepted the interviews. Before that, if you were interviewed in a fashion magazine, I mean, you would run out in a rail. He just answered the questions, and he was, he'd run. He was at that time he was running the cleft palate clinic at NYU. He was a great teacher,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yep.
he just if they called him from Vogue, he talked to them, and
Mm-hmm.
he knew everybody, and he just kind of brought plastic surgery out of the woodwork and into the mainstream, and from then on in, it just got crazy. It was amazing, and he single-handedly did it. It was amazing, and it turned out that after I finished my residency and started working, I bought a little vacation place out in a little town called Quogue on Long Island. It's a wonderful little place in the Hamptons that has nothing fancy at all. It's just families.
Sure.
And Tom had a house there, and Mike Hogan had a house there. But Tom had a tennis court. And so I used to play tennis at his court every weekend, every morning, Saturday and Sunday. And he'd have like Kirk Douglas and this guy and that guy, and I'd be just like, what the hell do I know? But I was the best tennis player. And Tom used to ask me all the time, how are you doing? How's your practice? And I was making like nothing. And at that time, Sherelle Aston was working for him.
We just had him on the podcast.
Yeah.
Sherelle. So I asked, I know how much Sherelle was making from Tom. And Tom says, how are you doing? And I said, I'm just doing great. I was making like a tenth of what Sherelle was doing, but I could still hit an overhead right into Tom's face.
That's funny.
And we were really good friends. And Tom would come into my driveway, honk the horn at 11 o'clock at night and try and get a cigar, that kind of stuff. But he never sent me a patient, and I never told him I was starving. But, it worked out.
And it's interesting how everything evolves because, accepting an interview was a big deal. Nowadays, like, people are posting on social media, they're showing before and afters of their patients. They can't get enough screen time to just
Mhm.
promote themselves and all the cosmetic stuff. So it's kind of just, at least from my perspective, interesting to see the spectrum of how things change. And I'm sure that's also hard to get patients back then when it's kind of like, I don't want to promote myself, but you need to promote yourself
You
to
have
get
to.
patients.
I,
Yeah.
I do, about a year ago, I started doing these social media things because my wife and the people in my office said you have to do it. Even on my website, I don't have before and afters. And I say things that I believe. So I tell the absolute truth. And we have 100,000, more than 100,000 followers. And I tell them that this is like a lot of crap, or this is good, or this is junk. I believe that bullshit. And each one is very short. I do 20 minutes a week to do it. Just come into my office and they just run the camera and ask me a bunch of questions. And I love doing it because it's exactly the way I deal with my patients. Totally and completely honest and straightforward. And they come when people come to me and ask me about what's different between somebody's $300,000 facelift and why aren't you that good, charge $300,000? I tell them the truth, that this person was actually my resident, that we were going to fire that person.
Yeah.
Well, to top your $300,000 facelift, I actually found out that I think the most expensive facelift is $750,000.
They
I
must
think.
be very good. I guess it
Sounds
must
like a
take about
gimmick.
24 hours to do it. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah. So I guess that takes us to the point about, I feel it's funny to think about plastic surgery, where social media is taking it with the celebrities, and now recently Kylie Jenner going out and saying about her plastic surgery, breast augmentation, etc. But also these astronomical costs for plastic surgery, and people are saying that it's starting to be the surgery for the elite. What's your take on all of this?
It's nonsense. I mean, you can't believe what you read in the papers and see on in the media. The reality is that real plastic surgeons, most of us, and Sherelle Aston and I were laughing about this not too long ago. We would, if we tried to charge fees like that, we would either laugh or throw up. I mean, come on. It's serious.
Yeah.
There's everything has a value, and the value is what people pay. A piece of art is worth what it sells for at auction, but there has to be some common sense here. And we know, and what I tell, but on these social media things is that there are really, really wonderfully trained, excellent plastic surgeons every place who do a great job and charge a reasonable price, which I think is exorbitant anyway for the amount of time it takes to do what we do. We're wonderfully well compensated, and taking advantage that way is just the greater fool theory or the emperor's new clothes. It's just nutty.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's also interesting, Hank. I don't know what your thought is on this too, because patients don't really have access to know what other plastic surgeons are really charging for this stuff. They just know what the plastic surgeon that they're going to is. They just know that this facelift is $100,000. They don't
Yeah.
know that there's a $10,000 or $20,000 option
No.
that might just be just as good.
And unfortunately, with all the social media, yeah, there's more exposure, but it's almost swinging too far in that direction where there's a lot of misinformation. Patients aren't able to be educated by just scrolling on Instagram instead of meeting a surgeon in person and really taking the time to compare outcomes. And there's probably airbrush on their posts and stuff, so it's really scary in that sense.
Well, if you look at some of those, without naming the names of the celebrities who have recently posted the pictures every place, they don't even look like people. I mean, I and my patient, do you want to look like that? You want to look like the best version of you. You want to look natural. You don't want to look like you did anything. You don't want to look like a Cupid doll with ping pong balls in your cheeks. You want to look like a person. You have to decide who you are and what you want to be. And so I always promise my patients just two things: that they'll look natural and I do the surgery. That's it.
Yeah, I
It's a
love
big
that.
deal.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
a natural version of yourself is a great way to put it.
And then building off of this ever changing landscape in plastic surgery for someone like me who's, still a resident, what's some advice for like the next generation of plastic surgeons in terms of what we should focus on too in both technical surgical skill but also just interaction with patients, how you're talking about how you promise your patients two things. What are just, some things that we should focus on in our training?
Well, I don't know what individual training programs are doing now, but for example, at our program, there's no more cosmetic surgery clinic. So there's no exposure to what they're going to be doing in practice. The residents were given the option to go to our offices, and they never even showed up over the last few years. Now it's part of what they have to do in order to finish their residency, because you have to be exposed to what I do to say, boy, I don't want to be as bad as he is, or I'd like to do it the way he does. You need to see everything. I know doing is what it's about, but you have to see everything also. How many years of training have you had up until now in general surgery and the whole business?
So I'm a second year resident and we do about a half of year of general surgery my first year and a half my second year. So I'll have about 5 years of plastic surgery in total.
Well, that's I guess the way we do it the same. We do the same thing now. It's 5 or 6 years.
Mhm.
But in my day, we were interns, and then we did full general surgery residencies.
That's what I did.
But the time we went to plastic surgery residency, we were surgeons. We knew what
Mhm.
we were surgeons. We were board certified surgeons. Period.
Yep.
So it was a real deal. Now it's much harder because they throw you into plastic surgery before you know the basics of Halsteadian surgery, if you will. And I know there are good reasons for doing it, but it seems to me that it's to the detriment of your education, that you're not getting to see enough, to learn enough, and to be confident enough. If somebody's head falls off, you have to know how to put it back on. And we do. I remember the first time I was in OR watching a facelift. It's a big deal. I take out lungs. I've done all the aneurysms.
Yeah.
Stuff. So I'm doing a facelift. I'm supposed to worry about a little bleeding I see. It's bleeding. You stop it.
Yeah.
It's a matter of surgical
Yeah.
maturity, and you have to earn it at some way. So either in your residency or as in a fellowship or when you go out. But I think it's tougher for you than it was for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's funny what you say about the, taking out lungs or transplanting lungs and reflecting on plastic surgery, because after doing full general surgery at Hopkins and then doing my first hand call in plastic surgery, I said to myself, I was like, at least none of these hand patients will die. Like if I have a nearby,
I can't kill them. I can't kill them.
yeah.
I
Um,
tried, but I can't do it.
Yeah, but on an admirable note is that many surgeons, it sounds like especially you, are known for their hands but fewer for their pens. And what first drew you to writing? Like, is there a moment in time where you said, this is the day where I sat down with a pen and I just took off?
No. First of all, very few of my friends are doctors. One of my best pals,
I thought you wanted to be like all your friends who are doctors.
that's the old days. I'm
Okay.
talking about
We're not friends with them anymore.
they're not friends, but the people that I pal around with in New York, only one doctor that I'm very close with, and that's Eric Rose, who used to be chief of surgery, chief of heart surgery at Columbia, and maybe the smartest man I know. But most of my friends are writers. These are the guys, and I have a group of guys that I've had lunch with every Wednesday for 35 years.
That was your lunch
Wow.
today.
And they're all writers, and they've all done very exceptional. One of the guys, when he was 26 years old, wrote Blazing Saddles.
Love
I'm
that
serious.
movie.
It's pretty good. And another one of the guys had the back page of Time magazine for about 20 years, writing politics. And before that, he wrote politics for New York Magazine. Another one has been a television news person, commentator for many, many years. Another one, famous advertising writer, the original Madman. And so,
Wow.
so all my friends were verbal and funny and didn't take themselves seriously and did things really, whatever they did well. And I've always written a little bit, but and I'd written a few things for magazines because a lot of my friends are magazine editors and they would ask me to. But the Halstead book was the first real writing adventure. And that came about because I was sitting in the coffee room on the 11th floor at the New York Hospital. And the guys, George Hoyer was Halstead's favorite resident.
Mm-hmm.
And for 20 years, he was the chief of surgery at New York Hospital. And those are the years spanning the Second World War. And all the old guys who were the senior guys in the surgical department were Hoyer residents. So they were all talking about the stories that Hoyer would tell them about Halstead. I went to one of my friends who was then the editor of Newsweek, and I said, let's do this book. And he said, there's not enough in it. It's just not enough of a story. So I dropped it. And then about, 5 or 10 years later, I just said, I can't let this go. And one day I was down at Hopkins and I was in the library and I saw the painting.
The Halstead Library.
No, the I don't know.
The Welch.
Yeah, the Welsh Library. And
Yeah.
I saw the painting.
Hank, I'll have to take you there.
Yeah, I would love it.
I saw the four doctors, the painting. All the kids who were doing the work in the library didn't even notice there was a painting there. I was mesmerized, and I said, "Screw it, I'm going to do this."
There's a sign.
And I went and wrote the book.
Wow.
Imagine maybe if you didn't go to the library that day, maybe things would have been different.
I think I would read the book anyway.
Wait, I need to ask this. Did Mel Brooks, did he just direct Blazing Saddles?
No. What happened was Andy Bergman wrote the short story, Blazing Saddles.
Oh.
Mel bought it, and then the
That
screenwriters
makes sense.
were Mel, Andy Bergman, what the hell's the guy's name? Richard Pryor, and another fellow whose name is and Norman Steinberg, and they wrote it together, and Mel directed it.
Genius writing.
Yeah, really genius. He's written a lot of great stuff. He wrote The Freshman, Honeymoon in Vegas, and he directed all those things as well. And he's genuinely funny guy. I mean, not a comedian. The comedians are funny in real life. He's just his mind. You just see this look on his face, and something horrific is about to come out. And it's a pleasure to be around people like that.
Yeah. The book Genius on the Edge is took me back to just such a interesting time in medicine and surgery, and having trained at Hopkins, it was so incredibly inspiring. It truly, just reading that book before, so me and all of my co-interns, group of 6 of us, we all read it by the recommendation of the people there.
That's so nice.
Well, and it was just there's nothing more inspiring that I can't recommend enough to the audience who's listening today when you're about to embark on your surgical training to read this book, because you'll be invigorated like no other fire, and that's the truth. But in reading the book, obviously Halstead was just such an incredibly remarkable person. Obviously, he had an addiction that we can talk about. What do you think you were most surprised about about his life and his work? What surprised you the most?
Well, I think that I knew more about his behavior when he was already chief at Hopkins than I did about his early life. So I had no idea that there was a time that he had a sense of humor and that he was, he was like a regular person, and he was an athlete, and he was one of the guys. The addiction changed him a lot and ruined his life, and he is addicted in the name of science. He certainly wasn't doing it for laughs, and he changed into this very kind of sour guy, and he you can't imagine that it would be great fun to be around him, and certainly to be his resident
Mhm.
or the resident that he didn't like.
Yeah.
It would have been a kind of rough thing. But he was a very interesting guy from from his school days. You never would have predicted that this is what he was going to become. Never. He was also a terrible student.
Yeah.
Didn't care, didn't like it, and then he became inspired, and became an inspiration. I mean, it's just this, you're the right place at the right time, and this a lot of people say, well, he's just a man. We're all just men, but he was the right man at the right place at the right time. And I think if I was in that position at that time, none of this stuff would have happened. But
Hmm.
he was the right person to be there at that time. And if he was at a different generation, it wouldn't have happened. It was just a confluence of events. Stars were aligned, and he was the genius. I mean,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
just changed the world.
Truly was a genius. Changed so much that still holds applicable today. And how he started off as a bad student. I went to a talk by Ben Carson once, and he said the same. Started off as a bad student. Yeah, I think you hear that theme more than just once, and then something clicks, or the person
Yeah,
ends up finding something that they love.
and we need something, and when you find something that channel all those nuts and bolts and screws that are going in different directions, and put them and make them work properly, you fall in love.
Yeah. You're right about his relationship with people who perhaps he didn't like. I would love to just be a fly on the wall and watch his interactions with Harvey Cushing or Osler. What do you think about both of those relationships?
Well, it's interesting. I have a very good friend who is Osler's granddaughter,
Wow.
and she, one of the, not Osler, I'm sorry, Cushing's granddaughter.
No way.
She was one of the Cushing girls.
Oh my gosh.
Her mother was one of the three Cushing girls, and
That's unbelievable.
she said he was, Cushing himself was
Does she
unbelievable.
remember him well?
No, but she was a child, but she knows from her mother that Cushing was totally remote, and
Mm-hmm.
had basically no relationship
Mhm.
with his family, with his kids, and he detested Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and hated to be seen with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't an easy guy, but he, as we were saying earlier, he worked hard, and he was driven. And Halstead realized it. And I mean, in the operating room for more than 12 years, he was Halstead. He
Yeah.
Halstead. He just was.
Yeah.
And he Cushing is one of the great men of medical sciences. I don't think Osler. I mean, Osler's great and all that. But in 1905, he left Hopkins, and he went to England, and he did nice things and wrote a nice book. But Cushing invented neurosurgery.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Neurosurgery, and he was a general surgeon. I mean, you can't believe this stuff.
You can't. You know,
Incredible.
you talk about addiction to cocaine, but I think we've lost an addiction to medicine and surgery. Like these individuals were so addicted to the science and the medicine and the surgery that they founded specialties. But you might know the story better than me, but I remember the story of Cushing and Halstead that I heard. And of course, it's kind of like the game of telephone that I've heard so many times, but where there was a patient that Halstead wanted to operate on that was a thyroid. And Halstead went away for the weekend and came back and saw that Harvey Cushing was operating on the patient and walked into the OR. And Cushing had known that Halstead was going to operate on the patient.
That's great. That's a
So,
good story.
but in his like double life of addiction, secrecy, innovation, And as a surgeon yourself, is there anything that you can relate to in that story?
I never thought of it that way. And there really is, I don't think so. I don't think I can relate to it in any way because, you know, I,
You seem very passionate about what you do, though. And so, like, you seem like so kind of addicted to the specialty, almost like him.
I never missed a day of work since the day I started. Absolutely love what I do. I love it.
It's like Dr. Aston. That's what Dr. Aston talked
Yeah.
about on the podcast.
Yeah, it's wonderful. You make people happy, and there's a challenge in every single case. You cruise through 99.9% of the case, but there's always something that you feel your coronary squeeze a little bit, and it's nice to see people appreciate what you do, and it's easy. I mean, well, you say what we do. Basically, we're not doing the 26-hour face transplants. Most of us, we're doing mostly cosmetic surgery, and every case is a couple of hours, and so we're not really. It's not like we're giving away our life. All of my cardiac surgeon acquaintances quit early because they crippled from bending over the table. It was just terrible. Our lives, what we do, our profession is so wonderful, and our lives are so good, and we're so well compensated for it. We have no right to utter a single complaint about anything ever. We're blessed. We are blessed.
Hank, are
Yeah.
you taking notes, please?
Yep. I'm blessed. I can't complain about anything.
No, it's great. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
I feel like you
fall-
might want to write a book on just that. I feel like we lose so much perspective. There's so much, and I fall into this trap too. One person talks about how much they're getting for this. The next person talks about what house they have on the beach. The next person talks about what car
Yeah.
they drive on the weekend. Then you fall into this trap of money, 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 money.
Well,
And
because you work so hard to get to that point where you can actually live, that it kind of sneaks in and takes over. But you're
yeah,
right.
yeah.
You're right.
But my dad trained at Hopkins. He did OBGYN in 1950s, and Howard and Georgiana Jones. Actually, my daughter's named Georgiana Jones. I don't know if you know of her, but they founded in vitro fertilization. So I know of Kelly and the big.
They founded it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but I know of Howard Kelly and the whole relationship Osler and Welch and Halstead, and I was always interested sort of in the relationships between Kelly and Halstead and Osler and Welch. But if you could sit down today with Halstead and do a podcast with him,
Yeah.
what are some of the things you'd want to know?
What a question. What always fascinated me is the ability to be the first one to do something, to make the leap. It's like you think about Norm Shumway waiting to do the first heart transplant, and Christian Barnard, who done nothing in the lab, just went and did it. Being able to make that leap. And Halstead did so many things that no one had done before. To me, it out of my ability to envision, because of the world we live in, you can't just do things.
Yeah.
You can't.
They're a experiment, the ethic, all this nonsense.
Yeah.
And another heart surgery story in Texas about the purloined heart, artificial heart that DeBakey had. He had somebody working in his lab and doing most of it, and then he kind of lost interest, and Cooley took over, and DeBakey was in Washington at an NIH meeting, and some guy came in who had end-stage heart disease. 3/4 of his left ventricle was gone. And Cooley said, "I'm going to try and patch this up, but if I can't do it, I'm putting in this artificial heart, and it's experimental. You have to know it's experimental." And of course, the guy couldn't survive by just sewing up the heart after removing the necrotic tissue. So he put this artificial heart in, and the guy lasted a very short period of time. And it was allegedly a bridge to transplant, but really it was to see if an artificial heart worked.
Yeah.
And DeBakey went bananas. It was the purloined heart, and they fought, and it was all this. They didn't speak for 35 years. Just a wonderful, wonderful story. But he was doing something the first time, and he ended up in court. The family first, boy, Dr. Cooley, you're the best. We love you. And everybody was on television. And then the lawyers got involved, and a year later they said they weren't told it was an experiment. And
Wow.
it was thrown out of federal court. But Cooley, was on pins and needles for a year because of it. But he had the guts to do it.
Yeah.
Cooley at Hopkins, he did the first aneurysm.
Yeah.
By the way, Cooley gave his residents Genius on the Edge as Christmas gifts.
Wow. I
Wow.
think I'm going to start doing that for our residents, Hank. I think that'll
Yeah,
be a
I think
good.
it'd be great. And obviously, Dr. Serletti always talks about this book too. He always promotes it.
Dr. Soletti, Dr. Scott
I think
Levin.
Yeah.
it's out of print.
Yeah.
We sold like 9 copies. The book did well, but not well enough to keep going because the publishing house was, I've forgotten the name of it even, Kaplan. They are the ones that do the student tests, the Kaplan
Yeah.
education system, and they decided to go into the publishing in a general way. And they published about 10 books, and then they closed the division, so it was never reprinted.
Wow.
We need your friend to write it,
So
make it a short
is this
story.
one of 10?
Well, it sold a few, and I think I mentioned to you that I did innumerable Halstead talks every place. And it came to the point where I was asked to come to some graduation or some meeting, and I said, no, I can't stand it. I can't do it again. I don't want to hear his name. And then, so a lot of the times, the Halstead talks, there were people who were hobbyists who knew much more than I did. And I had to look all this stuff up, and then I'd be fighting with people. But these minutiae, I didn't give a shit. Enough, stop.
We need a new topic.
It's a great story, but come on.
The fanatics. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, because it's that way with everything. But for me, it was I loved doing it. I loved all the people I met in the course of this, and it was a very nice experience.
So people doing this on the side, like it's not a thing you're doing it for money or for profit. It's more of just a passion thing.
You do. It's a great story to tell.
It's a great story.
The Cardiac Cowboys, the book they did last year, is about to be big nationwide podcast. iHeartRadio took it over, and I think the 25th of this month is National Heart Day or something, and it's going out. They're pushing the thing, and it's also a great story. And I think that my income from this will exceed $75, maybe $100. But it was so much fun to do. I loved the guys, and I love the stories. It was again the history of medicine. It's who we are. It's why we're who we are.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
It's so great. Even just hearing you talk, you can tell that your eyes light up when you're talking about it, just to reflect on how passionate you are about it. Is there anyone aside from I know we've talked enough about Halstead, but is there anyone aside from him that you're deeply fascinated by in medicine, or you think deserve great attention?
Or our next book?
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that, and most of the great people have. There are 2 things that you have to consider. Has a good book been written, and are people interested? And that you ask because you need a publisher. These things are professionally published. I don't self-publish. And so it has to be a topic that would be of some interest. For example, originally, the Cardiac Cowboys book, I wanted to write a book about the feud between DeBakey and Cooley.
I could tell. Yeah.
Great. And my agent, who was a terrific agent, said nobody's going to buy it. Nobody's going to buy it. It has to be a bigger story. You want to write that, we'll put it in the New Yorker, but it's not a book. And so I got the other guys into it and made it into a book. And that's the hard part. I mean, you want to write something about the Salk and Sabin, that's great, but a lot of it's been written I know a little bit about Salk's personality because I was friends with one of his brothers, with his brother, and there's a couple of good stories there. Sabin or Sabin, I don't know how you say his name, but I don't know anything about him. That's a really good story.
We're actually going to have Dr. Fitzharris on the podcast from a Facemaker.
That's good. And have you had uh, Eddie Rodriguez on.
Yes, we
Yeah.
have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
he's great. So Hank, Dr. Imber was telling me earlier that he's tasked with writing the history of NYU plastic surgery,
Oh.
which
they
is,
they had it was very interesting. Joe McCarthy asked me if I would wanted to talk to me, asked me if I would be interested in doing it, and for me, they were the enemy. It's NYU, and I mean, you can talk about these jerks, you know. But they were all guys I grew up with. I know all the stories. And, I sat with Sherelle a month or so ago, and we're just laughing because, the guys who were the great ones were our teachers, and we know how great they, quote, were. And the guys who then the next generation are us, and we know how mediocre we are. So it's just so much fun.
Yeah.
So I'm enjoying doing it. And I don't know if you know much about Joe McCarthy, but
yeah, of course.
terrific. He was
Yeah, spectacular.
moved craniofacial surgery.
Mm-hmm.
But you talk about characters. Tessier's a story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you know anybody that really knew that Tessier was doing 15 cases a day? He had 3 ORs going at once, and he had assistants doing everything. He'd open and then take off and go to the next room. He was doing a zillion noses and facelifts and the occasional craniofacial case.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that.
There was an interview with Henry Kawamoto on the the podcast of the Craniofacial Society. And I think last year, 2023, he was interviewed for an hour, and he was hysterical. He was great.
Yeah.
But he was just, a brilliant guy and a great contributor. And he said something very sad. He said that craniofacial's over. He said, we were training so many people, and with the genetics now and amniocentesis and
Yeah.
we know there are going to be no more patients. It's
Well,
really amazing.
in a way, let's hope that's true. That'd
Of
be
course, we
great.
hope it's true, but we have to also stop making everybody a craniofacial surgeon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our joke used to be that everybody's operating on the same croissants. The same patient over and over again,
Yeah.
every patient. But now they're few. They're really few.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have obviously so much wisdom and knowledge, and you're in the know with all these stories, and I'm sure a lot of them make your books. Is there any story, whether it's about someone you've written about or someone you haven't written about, that is okay enough to share that you've never been
Well, there
able
are a
to
lot of them
share?
that are not okay enough to
Yeah.
share, which we talk about among ourselves. But on the tip of my tongue, there isn't. These guys they weren't as pristine as you think, or as you'd like to think. And they're just people. They're just guys. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And they've all made terrible mistakes, and they've all abused privilege, and they've all given too much of themselves and given too little to their families. And it's that's part of greatness, and it's a sad part of greatness.
Yeah.
It is.
No, you're right. And I think we let that it takes us away, and a lot of negatives come from that sometimes. So we have to stay grounded for sure. And what I love about this podcast is giving the opportunity of our listeners to hear from people like you, to hopefully give them the bigger picture and some of the more important things as they pursue their careers. Because plastic surgery is such a special field, and when you find that passion and you see all the positives in it, and you take great care of patients, and you, as you mentioned, try to make them a better version of themselves while still looking natural, like all of that is just so great. You mentioned earlier, you potentially wanted to be an architect, evolved into plastic surgery. What's one thing about you that you think would surprise our listeners that people should know?
Well, I'm not sure they should know it, but I think, the unique ability of not taking myself seriously. I mean, I take what I do seriously, but when I think about me, it's a joke. I mean, how the hell I ended up in this position and so successful, it's just another lucky juvenile delinquent. You just have to. I taught my children what I would teach my residents and try to tell them that the only thing I ever wanted from my children is that they become nice people.
Yeah.
That's all. And if you carry that attitude into your practice, being a nice person and trying to treat people with dignity and being nice to people, it shows. They don't even have to say thank you. It's just the right thing. And that's what your parents tell you, and that's what you hope your kids become, and they tell their children. And no matter what they do, that's really what life's about. It's the single most important thing to me. But you have
And
to be nice.
you can tell that you're a writer from that response about not taking yourself seriously, because I feel like a lot of writers and in movies and in books, the fine line between a comedy and a tragedy, sometimes it's almost the same thing.
And there's no question about it. I mean, the two masks. It's just that there's no question about it. And
Yeah.
and we have
That's such a great
we
point.
get so much adulation that we have to put it in proper perspective. I mean, it astounds me sometimes, and I don't take it lightly. And I have to say that even in my imperfection, I give my all to every single patient at every single case, and that's all you can do.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
all you
that's
can.
why you charge $1 million for the facelift.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I keep trying, but they keep laughing. But you know what's going to help, Hank? It's going to help you because the
Yeah.
standards are being pushed up so high that you know by the time you're in practice, the numbers are going to be great. You'll have to do one case a week, and you'll go to your house in Laguna. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, Hank's actually driving a better car than me. He actually bought his first convertible recently.
That's not true. We don't have that stipend in our contract yet.
my God, what residents make at the Hopkins now?
Well, at Hopkins, I mean, it's probably similar to Penn. It's probably anywhere around 70-ish to
And and
80.
and Penn's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like 80-ish.
And what
80-ish.
did you make when you were a resident?
50.
50.
Pretty good.
Inflation.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
I was
It's
when I was
honestly,
I made 1,800.
that's crazy. But, truthfully, I mean, that's a whole other subject. I just feel like they're so underpaid. I mean, they are the brightest of the brightest
Terrible.
and work so hard. That's just my opinion.
I think when I was a resident, we used to moonlight all the residents, and we did house calls for a house call service, and all the plastic surgery residents, we each alternate on our nights off, we would do it, but we were on every other night, and I'm from the generation that was on every other night for 7 years,
Wow.
Yeah.
and you'd moonlight in between, and it's just that's not necessary. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
But you're right in a way. Like by the time you get to the finish line, your first thought is money. You
You
know?
can't you can't help it. It's just completely crazy. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
completely crazy. And
Yeah.
I remember mine because I was really in debt. The idea that I was actually going to be making over $100,000 a year shocked me. I mean,
Yeah.
it was like
Yeah.
a fortune. It was a fortune.
Yeah.
And times were different. This was the 70s. The residents shouldn't be slaves. They should be slaves, but they should be paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
You should be you really work. I'm actually a great proponent of uh, the
100-hour work week.
every other night situation because we were taught the patient comes in, you see the patient through the lysis or the crisis, and you're with that patient for 36 hours, and you learn what illness is. You just learn. You can't help it. And I know that you need to have time to rest. I know it's not fair, but we learned a lot from that. And all the Halstead residents lived that way. I mean, that's what resident means. You lived in the hospital. We just lived in the damn hospital and probably hated every minute of it. I don't remember, but we learned so much. It's just you don't learn in an 8-hour day. And you don't learn in the shift at 5 o'clock and somebody else comes on. That's nonsense.
Yeah.
You can't sell it. Sorry, Hank.
No,
That's
no.
okay.
We've been talking about
I
we need to
understand.
change the name residents to something else like campers or something or like
That makes us sound way too soft.
Now we saw.
Campers. That's
That's
funny.
great stuff.
you also we're getting through our last final few questions, but you have such like a mature viewpoint on life that I have a feeling I know you're going to I know your response to this. But if there's something looking back on your career, your life that you could say, I wish I did this one thing differently. If I could go back in time and do this one thing differently, I'd just be so much happier today. Is there
Well,
anything
There's a stock that I wanted to buy.
Apple.
No, I don't. I don't feel that way. I have done most everything I wanted to do in my life. I made it sound as if I lived this terrible underprivileged existence, but I managed to make up for it by racing sailboats and playing polo and
Wow.
doing everything I wanted to do in my life. And I've never begrudged myself anything, and I never took anything from anybody. I earned every cent by doing my work, and I love my work and I love my life. And it's like, as I said earlier, it's a gift. It's a gift.
Mhm.
It's, I don't know who to thank, but it's a gift.
Yeah.
Guys,
Yeah.
you have that gift in your lap, and you're going to live with it for a generation. It's great.
Yeah.
What luck. What blind luck.
Yeah.
Idiots like doing something like this is great.
That's great advice. Special.
Hank, you want to ask the last couple?
Yeah, so these are just some fun ones we ask every single guest. So, do you listen to music in the OR? And if you do, what kind of music?
Yeah, I like to listen to classical music. I also like opera, and I love some jazz singers like Chet Baker. I like Chet Baker because he's a trumpet player and he phrases his songs, his vocals, like he's playing the trumpet. And he has a lousy voice, but I love listening to him. Everybody in my OR hates it. And then we have classical music on, and as the cases start to wear on, and I'm kind of slowing down a little bit, suddenly Rod Stewart comes on.
Mm.
Pick it up.
That moves me along a
Yeah.
little. But we always have music in the OR. I guess,
No Frank Sinatra?
yeah, sometimes. But I mean, I grew up with music in the OR. There's just so much Frank Sinatra you can take.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I like a lot of the classic rock music, that sort of thing. But there's no substitute for great orchestral music, and it just makes me happy. It's nice.
We listened to the Genius on the Edge audiobook.
Hank, that's why the books weren't selling. It's because of you, people like you.
There's this. I don't know if this is going to amuse you as much as it amused me, but they just did the Cardiac Cowboys. They in addition to the podcast that's coming out, they just did an audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
So I listened to the audiobook in the car driving up and back to the country, and I was fascinated. And there were times when I'd forgotten that I'd written the damn thing.
That's
It
amazing.
was great. It was just
Yeah.
so funny. You sit there and you listen to this stuff. You say, "Wow, that guy did that." You said, "Oh my God, what's the matter with me?" But it's really
Full life.
Yeah.
it was really funny. I was
That's great.
embarrassed. I told my wife. She thought I was nuts.
That's fun. And then our last question is, what's your favorite surgical instrument?
Probably the Castroviejo forceps.
Yeah, that's a great option.
Yeah, great answer.
So delicate and it works so well. And I can tell you a story about
They rotate easily.
Yeah, Castroviejo was an eye surgeon, and he had a hospital, a little clinic on 91st Street between Fifth Avenue and Madison Avenue. And when I first went into practice, I went on staff there at his hospital, and I go to do a case, and you tell me they're ready, and I come into the operating room, and there's my case, and 6 feet away, somebody else is doing a case in the same operating room, and which I'd never seen before in my life. And they had 2 or 3 things going on in one OR, and it was just like, I guess that's what they did with cataracts. And I took off. I mean, I never went there again, but I'd never seen that. That's in days past. And he was a genius also. He was a great surgeon, and he made a great tool.
That's so cool. And I can't thank you enough. This was just such a fun,
So special.
really, 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 really special. And I said this earlier, but we had, unfortunately, one of our faculty members pass, Dr. Aaron Warman, and he was such an incredible, good person, and, poured his heart out to patients and to students and to everything. But he was such a history buff. He talked about, Halstead, and he had more historical context for. He was the person who would come up to you and argue with you about facts, probably.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if there's one thing I regret is that this podcast didn't come out before, while he could listen to it, because he was just such a big fan of yours. And anyways, it warms my heart, just the past hour that we spent together. And thanks so much for all of your wisdom. It's been really, really special.
Well, I really, appreciate being asked to do this because you guys do a great job, and I'm totally comfortable and I'm honored, and I'm terrific. And I'm going to be able to say I know Hank who does a $300,000 facelift.
Yeah, exactly. And me too. I'm an academic, so I'm going to go to Hank when I need money.
That's funny. No, this has just been incredible. You talked about blessings and you don't know who to thank. Me
Exactly.
being able to be on this podcast and talk to people like you at this stage of my career is just irreplaceable. So it's such an
That's
honor to talk to you. Thank you so
I'm
much.
happy to be part of it. Thank you so much. That's delightful.
Thank you for listening to The Deep End, a plastic surgery podcast. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and leave a rating on Apple Music or Spotify. Video from the podcast is available on Instagram and YouTube at The Deep End Podcast. Join us again soon for more conversations with luminaries and experts in the world of surgery.